Hopkins and North Carolina, and then eventually she ended up as a faculty at Harvard. Then I said, you have to distinguish yourself when you make an application. And she did by various science competitions, dance performances, things like that some time ago. Then they said, what's the new idea? I said that if you really, really want to get into science, try to understand how Nobel laureates got into science. Because earlier I published a book, abridged and published a book on scientists greater than Einstein. And the book contains 10 scientists whose contributions, Carl Landsteiner kind of people, who contributed to the welfare of all the patients or people. And millions of lives were saved with their work. And one, Billy Woodward in Kansas, he's not a friend of mine, but when he was struck down with some severe problem, one simple medicine, allopurinol, gave him relief. Then he thought that scientist must be greater than Einstein. So he boldly named the book as Scientist Greater Than Einstein. When I read that on a flight, non-stop, 400 pages to India, I was surprised at how all these things were not in the brains of the students or public. So I told Billy Woodward, that's a very big, long book. Instead, I'll make it into 200 pages. So he said yes. Then at the same time, I talked to some people who were alive, and they also said, okay, do it. Then I did that. That was the background, but not as actually pursuing that as a line of activity. But now, I told this girl that do it, and she did immediately take up. But then we can't publish a single chapter anywhere because there's not much of novelty in it. Then I said, don't worry, with my money, I'll publish a book. But you have to get another dozen students or so, not just one or two students. Then she worked and we worked in my circle, everybody's connections. 14 students finally came around to write this. But I put a one condition. You cannot simply do Google search and finish it. You somehow have to contact them, send your questions, get your answers, think about it, reflect on those answers, and then write the chapter. This is pre-ChatGPT time. So that's how we got it. Then these students, again, they want to write for the second edition. I didn't have any plans to make the second edition, but they said that, why don't you do another edition? There are so many Nobel laureates we would like to explore. I said, okay, we'll do it. Now we are going to do it in chemistry, physics, and maths, though it's not exactly Nobel, but it's a field matter than things like that.
So, this all sounds very nice. It was fun to be interviewed. I worry about one thing, and that worry is that the world does enough of putting Nobel laureates on a pedestal. We do enough of it. It's not the road to success. It's not, and you even said that in this book that you wrote, different criteria for what has been accomplished. I myself have a very probably slightly different take on what the Nobels are. I think that they're not prizes to the best scientists. They're not they're not to the people that have the biggest labs or produce the most papers or publish in the, they are in many cases awarded to work that change science or how we think about science. And as I read many of those papers, many of the biographical sketches that are there are a surprising number of these people that were doing one thing and noticed something else. They weren't trying to answer a question. They weren't trying to succeed as some people were. Some people were very directed at trying to answer questions. Watson and Crick. But there were many others that were working and suddenly realized something else. And it is, I think, rather remarkable how many times you will read in the biographies statements of, I was working on X and suddenly Y was there, or I wasn't thinking about this and then all of a sudden this happened. There's a couple of rather famous examples of this, or at least I feel that they should be more famous. GFP is one of them. GFP was discovered by
and you connected them.
Was done by complete accident, and there was no imagining that there were proteins that were fluorescent. It wasn't on people's radars that such things could exist, and Shimomura found it by accident, or by thinking about what he was working on, realizing that that's what he had. But it wasn't sort of directed. So the idea of how do you go about, it's not how do you go about getting a Nobel Prize.